Hi guys. Hopefully you guys can hear me alright, because I'm just recording this on my phone. But yeah, today I just wanted to hang out with you guys, and I'm gonna be reading a book. It's the Five Nights at Freddy's book. Don't come for me, I know. But yeah, I don't know, sometimes, just a quick talk before, sometimes I get on like YouTube and stuff, and I kind of just miss how things were back in the good old days, back in the good old YouTube days and things like that. I just feel like so much stuff on social media and things have become so like mainstreamed. It's like people learned all the psychological tricks to keep people like engaged and like I don't know. I kind of miss like the old YouTube sometimes, like the YouTube that was just people coming on and talking and like recording little messages to each other and things like that. But yeah, and also with everyone staying home and stuff, I feel like a lot of people, I think even before the pandemic and everything, a lot of people felt really alone like all the time, and I really want to do what I can to help, but I'm also really introverted and there's only so many hours in the day, so it gets really hard. But I still want to try to help people feel like they're a little less alone. And also, if you really need it, always remember that there are hotlines for people who feel like they need to talk to somebody but don't know who to talk to. They're just a click away, a Google search away to find. And you're never really alone, and I hope this video can help you feel a little less alone or whatever. So this video is also gonna be like very old school YouTube vibes, because I know how much I like to nitpick about myself, and I used to make YouTube videos, but I took them all down and I switched the whole account, and now this is a whole different account. But I'm tired of watching myself for hours and like getting upset about the way I said my words or whatever. So this whole thing is just gonna be unedited from how I understand it's gonna be, and this won't be the type of video I make on my channel every time, but I just wanted to hang out with you guys in a way where I could hang out with the most amount of you guys and chill anytime that you need it, you know? And so whether you're about to go to bed or you're working on something and you just want to have some of like that white noise, kind of feel like there's somebody around when you don't know who to talk to, or when you don't really need, when you don't really want somebody to like respond, you just want somebody around and you don't really know who you can go to have that kind of conversation or like to have that time with them. I'm hoping that this can be helpful, and I'm really excited because I've always really wanted to, like, I've been wanting to read this book. I've had it for, I have 4 of them, and I've had them for a really long time, but I can never find a way to like motivate myself to read it. So this will be good for me as well, because I'll get back into reading, and Five Nights at Freddy's is really interesting to me. I know a lot of people think it's childish and stuff, but yeah. Also, I have a huge jug of water, so I'm gonna be drinking water, so make sure you stay hydrated and things like that. I know this is really awkward, but I promise you it's not. Like, it's just the vibes. It's just the vibes. That's it. That's all that I try to do, is the vibes. I started reading it, but I'm gonna restart it. And I think the first story is like 60 pages long. Yeah, it's like 68. So I don't know if I'll read through the whole story today because that sounds like a lot, but we can see. We will see. We'll probably get at least maybe like 20 pages in. So yeah. Also, Toast is here. And this is the Minecraft cow. He was laying down, so I'm laying back down. And we have Nezuko-chan back there. We have a few people around. But yeah, okay. Sorry for dumping you with all that information. Back to whatever you were doing, or if you're just laying down with me. I appreciate it. I'm gonna be reading out loud, by the way. I don't know if that was, like, the point was clear, but I'm just gonna be reading out loud, and you don't have to listen to what I'm saying. I don't really care. I just wanna be around you. Sorry. Okay, the first story is called Into the Pit. The dead possum's still there. Oswald was looking out the passenger window at the gray furry corpse on the side of the road. Somehow it looked even deader than it had yesterday. Last night's rain hadn't helped. Nothing looks deader than a dead possum, Oswald's dad said. Except this town, Oswald mumbled, looking at the boarded-up storefronts and the display windows, which were displaying nothing but dust. What's that? Dad said. He was already wearing that stupid red vest that they put him in when he worked at the deli counter at the snack space. Oswald wished he'd wait to put it on until after he dropped him off at school. This town, Oswald said, louder this time. This town looks deader than a dead possum. His dad laughed. Well, I don't guess I can argue with that. 3 years ago, when Oswald was 11, there had actually been stuff to do here. A movie theater, a game and card store, and an ice cream shop with amazing waffle cones. But then the mill had closed. The mill had basically been the reason the whole town existed. Oswald's dad had lost his job, and so had hundreds of the other kids' moms and dads. Lots of families had moved away, including Oswald's best friend, Ben, and his family. Oswald's family had stayed because his mom's job at the hospital was steady and they didn't want to move far away from Grandma. So Dad ended up with a part-time job at the snack space, which paid $5 an hour less than he made at the mill. And Oswald watched the town die. One business after another shut down like the organs in a dying body, because nobody had the money for movies or games or amazing waffle cones anymore. Are you excited it's the last day of school? Dad asked. It was one of those questions adults always ask, like, how was your day? And did you brush your teeth? Oswald shrugged. I guess, but there's nothing to do with Ben gone. School's boring, but home's boring too. When I was 10, I wasn't home in the summer until I got called in for summer, Dad said. I rode my bike and played baseball and got into all kinds of trouble. Oswald said. Oh, are you saying I should get into trouble? Oswald said. No, I'm saying that you should have fun. Dad pulled into the dropped-off line in front of Westbrook Elementary. Have fun. He made it sound so easy. Oswald walked through the school's double doors and ran smack into Dylan Cooper, the last person he wanted to see. Oswald was apparently the first person Dylan wanted to see, though, because his mouth had spread in a wide grin. Dylan was the tallest kid in 5th grade and clearly enjoyed looming over his victims. Well, if it isn't Oswald the Ocelot, he said, his grin spreading impossibly wider. That one never gets old, does it? Oswald walked past Dylan and was relieved when his tormentor chose not to follow him. When Oswald and his 5th grade classmates were preschoolers, there was a cartoon on one of the little kids' channels about a big pink ocelot named Oswald. As a result, Dylan and his friends had started calling him Oswald the Ocelot. On the first day of kindergarten, and it had never stopped. Dylan was the kind of kid who picked on anything that made you different. If it hadn't been Oswald's name, it would have been his freckles or his cowlick. The name-calling had gotten much worse this year in U.S. history when they learned that the man who shot John F. Kennedy was named Lee Harvey Oswald. Oswald would rather be an ocelot than an assassin. That's so funny. I'd want to be an assassin. Or maybe I'd want to be an ocelot, I have no idea. Anyways, since it was the last day of school, there was no attempt at doing any kind of real work. Mrs. Meacham had announced the day before that the students were allowed to bring their electronics as long as they took responsibility for anything getting lost or stolen. This announcement meant that no effort would be made towards any educational activity of any kind. Oswald didn't have any modern electronics. True, there was one laptop at home, but the whole family shared it, and he wasn't allowed to bring it into school. He had a phone, but it was the saddest, most out-of-date model imaginable, and he didn't want to take it out of his pocket because he knew any kid who saw it would make fun of him, make fun of how pathetic it was. So while the other kids played games on their tablets or handheld consoles, Oswald sat. After just sitting became intolerable, he took out a notebook and pencil and started to draw. He wasn't the best artist in the world, but he could draw well enough that his images were identifiable, and there was a certain cartoony quality about his drawings that he liked. The best thing about drawing, though, was that he could get lost in it. It was like he fell into the paper and became part of the scene he was creating. It was a welcome escape. He didn't know why, but lately he had been drawing mechanical animals, bears, bunnies, and birds. He imagined them being human-sized and moving with jerkiness of robots in an old science fiction movie. They were furry on the outside, but the fur covered a hard metal skeleton filled with gears and circuits. Sometimes he drew the animals' exposed metal skin or sketched them with their fur peeled back to show some of the mechanical workings underneath. It was a creepy effect, like seeing a person's skull peeking out from beneath the skin. Oswald was so immersed in his drawings that he was startled when Mrs. Meacham turned off the lights to show a movie. Movies always seemed like a teacher's final act of desperation on the day before break, a way to keep the kids quiet and relatively still for an hour and a half before setting them loose for the summer. The movie Mrs. Meacham chose was, in Oswald's opinions, too babyish for a room full of fifth graders. It was about a farm with talking animals, and he had watched it before, but he watched it again because really, what else did he have to do? That was hard. At recess, kids stood around tossing a ball back and forth and talking about what they were going to do over the summer. I'm going to football camp. I'm going to baseball camp. I'm going to hang out at my neighborhood pool. I'm going to stay with my grandparents in Florida. Oswald sat on the bench and listened. For him, there would be no camps and no pool memberships, no trips because there was no money. And he'd draw pictures and play video games and that he'd already beaten 1,000 times and maybe go to the library. If Ben were still here, it would be different. Even if they were just doing the same old stuff, they'd be doing it together. And Ben could always make Oswald laugh, riffing on video game characters or doing a perfect impersonation of one of their teachers. He and Ben had fun no matter what they did. But now a summer without Ben yawned before him, empty and wide. Most days Oswald's mom worked from 12 p.m. until 12 a.m. So did his dad. So his dad had to make dinner. Usually they got by on frozen meals like lasagna or chicken pot pie, or on cold cuts and potato salad from the snack space deli that were still good enough to eat but not good enough to sell. When Dad did cook, it was usually things that just required boiling water. While Dad got their dinner ready, Oswald's job was to feed Jinx, their very old spoiled black cat. Oswald often thought that he used about the same Oswald often thought that he used about the same amount of cooking skill in opening Jinx's cat of stinky cat food as his dad used in his dinner preparations. Tonight, Oswald and Dad were sitting down to plates of blue box mac and cheese and some canned corn his dad had zapped in the microwave. It was a very yellow meal. You know, I was thinking, Dad said, squirting ketchup onto this macaroni and cheese. Why did he do that? Oswald wondered. I know you're old enough to stay home by yourself soon. By yourself some, but I don't like the idea of you staying by yourself the whole day while your mom and I are at work. I was thinking you could ride into town with me in the morning and I could drop you off at the library. You could read, surf the net. Oswald couldn't let this slide. How out of date could his dad be? Nobody says surf the net anymore, Dad. They do now because I just said it. Dad forked up some macaroni. Anyway, I thought you could hang out in the library in the mornings. When you get hungry, you could head over to Jeff's Pizza for a slice and a soda, and I could pick you up there once my shift's over at 3. Oswald considered for a moment. Jeff's Pizza was kind of weird. It wasn't dirty exactly, but it was run down. The vinyl on the booth seats had been repaired with duct tape, and the plastic letters had fallen off the menu board above the counter, so the listed toppings include pepperon and hamburger. It was clear that Just Pizza used to be something bigger and better than it was now. There was tons of unused floor space and a lot of unusual electrical outlets along the base of the walls. Also, on the far wall was a small stage, even though there were no performers there, not even so much as a karaoke night. It was a strange place, sad and not what it had once been, like the rest of the town. That being said, the pizza was decent, and more important, it was the only pizza in town if you didn't count the kind from the frozen food department at the snack space. The few good restaurants in town, including Gino's Pizza and Marco's Pizza, which, unlike Jeff, had a real pizza maker names, had closed their doors not long after the mill had. So you'll give me the money for pizza? Oswald asked. Since Dad's job was lost, Oswald's allowance had dwindled to practically nothing. Dad smiled a kind of sad smile, it seemed to Oswald. Son, we're bad off, but we're not so bad off I can't spot you $3.50 for a slice and a soda. Okay, Oswald said. It was hard to say no to a warm, gooey cheese slice. Since it wasn't a school night and wouldn't be again for quite some time, Oswald stayed up after Dad went to bed and watched an old Japanese monster movie with Jinx curled up, purring on his lap. Oswald had even seen a lot of B-grade Japanese horror films, but this one, Zandrelix versus Mecha-Zandrelix, was new to him. As always, Zandrelix just looked like a giant dragon thing, but Mecha-Zandrelix reminded him of the mechanical animals he drew when he stripped them of their fur. He laughed at the movie's special effects. The train Zandrelix destroyed was clearly a toy, and how the actor's lips movements didn't match the dubbed in English. Somehow, though, he always found himself rooting for Zandrelix, even though he was just a guy in a rubber suit. Somehow he managed to have a lot of personality. In bed, he tried to count his blessings. He didn't have Ben, but he had monster movies in the library and lunchtime pizza slices. It was better than nothing, but it still wasn't going to be enough to keep him going all summer. Please, he wished, his eyes closed tight. Please let something interesting happen. Oswald woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. The coffee he could do without, but the bacon smelled amazing. Breakfast meant time with his mom, often the only time he got with her until the weekend. After one necessary stop, he hurried down the hall to the kitchen. Well, look at that. My rising 6th grader has risen. Mom was standing over the stove in her fuzzy pink bathrobe, her blonde hair pulled back into a ponytail, flipping. Oh, yum, were those pancakes? Hi, Mom. She opened her arms. I demand a morning hug. Oswald sighed like it annoyed him, but he went over and hugged her. It was funny. With Dad, he always said he was too old for hugs, but he never turned down a hug from his mom's open arms. Maybe it was because he didn't get to spend much time with her during the week. While he and Dad spent so much time together, they sometimes got on each other's nerves. He knew Mom missed him and felt bad for having to work such long hours, but he also knew that since Dad's job at the snack space was just part-time, Mom's long hours were most of the reason the bills were getting paid. Mom always said that adult life was a fight between time and money. The more money you earned to spend on bills and necessities, the less time you got to spend with your family. It was a difficult balance. Oswald sat down at the kitchen table and thanked his mom when she poured his orange juice. Water break, little water break. First day of summer break, huh? Mom went back to the stove and scooped up a pancake with her spatula. Uh-huh. He probably should have tried to sound more enthusiastic, but he couldn't muster the energy. She slid the pancake into his plate and then served him 2 strips of bacon. Not the same without Ben, huh? He shook his head. He wasn't going to cry. Mom ruffled his hair. I know it's a bummer, but hey, maybe a new friend will move into town. Oswald looked at her hopeful face. Why would anybody move here? Okay, I see your point, Mom said, piling on another pancake. But you never know, or maybe somebody cool already lives here, somebody you don't even know yet. Maybe, but I doubt it, Oswald said. These pancakes are great, though. Mom smiled and ruffled his hair again. Well, I've got that going for me anyway. Do you want more bacon? If you do, you'd better grab it before your dad gets in here and vacuums it all up. Sure. It was Oswald's personal policy never to refuse more bacon. The library was actually kind of fun. He found the latest books and science fiction series he liked and a manga that looked interesting. As always, he had to wait forever to use the computers because they were all taken by people who looked like they had no place else to be. Men with scraggly beards wearing layers of ratty clothing, two thin women with sad eyes and bad teeth. He waited his turn politely, knowing that some of these people used the library for shelter during the day, then spent the night on the streets. Jeff's pizza was as weird as he had remembered. The big empty space beyond the booths and the tables was like a dance floor where nobody danced. The walls were painted a pale yellow, but they must have used cheap paint, or only one coat, because the shapes of whatever had been on the walls before were still visible. It had probably been some kind of mural with people or animals, but now it was just shadows behind a thin veil of yellow paint. Oswald sometimes tried to figure out what the shapes were, but they were too blobby to make out. There was the stage that never got used, standing empty but seemingly waiting for something. Though a feature even weirder than the stage lay in the back right corner. It was a large rectangular pen surrounded by yellow netting, but it had been roped off with a sign that said, "Do not use." The pen itself was filled with red, blue, and green plastic balls that had probably been brightly colored once, but now were faded and fuzzy with dust. Oswald knew that ball pits had been a popular feature in kiddie playlands, but had largely disappeared because of concerns about hygiene. After all, who was going to disinfect all those balls? Oswald had no doubt that if ball pits had still been popular when he was little, his mom wouldn't have let him play in one. As a licensed practical nurse, she was always happy to point out places she'd found to be too germy to play in. And when Oswald would complain that she'd never let him have any fun, she'd say, "You know what's not fun? Pink eye." Except for the empty stage and the ball pit, the strangest features in Jeff's Pizza was Jeff himself. He seemed to be the only person who worked there, so he both took orders at the counter and made the pizzas, but the place was never crowded enough that this was a problem. Today, like all other days, Jeff looked as if he hadn't slept in a week. His dark hair was sticking up in weird places, and he had alarming bags under his bloodshot eyes. His apron was stained with both recent and ancient tomato sauce. "What can I get ya?" he asked Oswald, sounding bored. "A cheese slice and an orange soda, please," Oswald said. Jeff stared off into the distance as though he had to think about whether the request was a reasonable one or not. Finally, he said, "Okay, $3.50. One thing you could say about Jeff's pizza slices, they were huge. Jeff served them on flimsy white paper plates that were soon stained with grease, and the corners of the triangles always overlapped the plate's rims. Oswald settled into a booth with his slice and soda. The first bite, the tip of the triangle, was always the best. Somehow, the proportions of all the flavors in that bite were perfect. He savored the warm, melty cheese, the tangy sauce, and the pleasantly greasy crust. As he ate, he looked around at the few other customers, a pair of mechanics from the oil change place that had folded up their pepperoni slices and were eating them like sandwiches. A table full of office workers clumsily attacked their slices with plastic forks and knives so they wouldn't drip the sauce on their ties and blouses, Oswald guessed. After Oswald finished his slice, he wished for one more, but he knew he didn't have the money for it, so he wiped off his greasy fingers and took out his library book. He sipped his soda and read, falling into a world where kids with secret powers went to a special school and learned how to fight evil. "Kid," a man's voice startled Oswald out of the story. He looked up to see Jeff in his sauce-stained apron. Oswald had figured he had outstayed his welcome. He sat in the booth reading for 2 hours after having bought a meal that cost less than $4. "Yes, sir," Oswald said, because politeness never hurt. "I got a couple more cheese slices that didn't sell at lunch. You want it?" "Oh," Oswald said. "No thanks, I don't have any more money." He wished he did, though. "On the house," Jeff said. "I just have to throw them away anyways." "Oh, okay, sure, thanks." Jeff picked up Oswald's empty cup. "I'll get you some more orange soda while I'm at it." "Thanks." It was funny. Jeff's expression never changed. He looked tired and miserable, even when he was being extra nice. Jeff brought 2 slices stacked on a paper plate and a fresh cup of orange soda. "Here you go, kid," he said, setting down the cup and the plate. "Thank you, Oswald." "Oh, thank you." Oswald wondered for a minute if Jeff felt sorry for him, if Jeff might think he was terribly poor, like the homeless people who hung out at the library, instead of just the regular, barely making ends meet poor that he was. But then Oswald figured, if there was a free pizza sitting in front of you, maybe it wasn't time to worry about the reasons for it. Maybe it was just time to eat. Oswald had no problem polishing off 2 huge slices. For the past month, his appetite had been unstoppable. When Mom cooked him piles of pancakes in the morning, she said he must be having a growth spurt, causing him to eat like he had a hollow leg. His phone vibrated in his pocket the second he had sucked down the last of his soda. He looked at his dad's text. We'll be out front at Jeff's in 2 minutes. Perfect timing. It had been a good day. The days at the library and Jeff's pizza started to add up. The first couple of weeks had been great, but now the library didn't have the next book in the series he was reading, and he had grown bored with his online fantasy game, which, while advertised as free, now wouldn't let him advance any further without paying money. He had gotten tired of not having anybody his age to hang out with. He hadn't gotten tired of the pizza yet, but he was starting to imagine that he might in the future. Tonight was family fun night. One night a week event that varied depending on Mom's work schedule. Back when the mill was still open, family fun night meant dinner in a restaurant, pizza or Chinese or Mexican. After their meal, they'd go to do some fun activity together. They'd go to the movies if something kid-friendly was playing, but if not, they'd go to the bowling alley or to the roller rink where Mom and Dad used to go on dates when they were in high school. Mom and Dad were great skaters, and Oswald was terrible, but they'd skate on either side of him, holding his hand and keeping him up. They'd usually top off their evening with a waffle cone at the ice cream place downtown. Oswald and Mom would make fun of Dad because no matter what ice cream flavors were available, he always got vanilla. Since the mill closed down, though, the family fun night had turned into a at-home affair. Mom would make something for dinner that was easy but festive, like tacos from a mix or hot dogs. They'd eat and then play board games or watch a movie they'd rented from Redbox. It was still fun, of course, but sometimes Oswald wished aloud for the old days of seeing new movies at the theater and having waffle cones after, and Dad had to remind him that the important thing was that they all got to spend time together. Sometimes when the weather was nice, they'd have a family fun night. They'd pack a picnic or pack a picnic of cold cuts and salads, courtesy of the snack space, and head over to the state park. They'd eat their dinner at a wooden table and watch squirrels and birds and raccoons. Afterwards, they'd go for a walk on one of the hiking trails. These outings were always a nice change, but Oswald was also aware of why these were the only family fun nights that ever got them out of the house. Picnics were free. Tonight they were staying in. Mom had made spaghetti and garlic bread. They had played a game of Clue, which Mom won as she usually did, and now they were piled up on the couch together in their pajamas, with a huge bowl of popcorn between them, watching a remake of an old science fiction movie. Once the movie was over, Dad said, "Well, that was pretty good, but not as good as the real version." "What do you mean the real version?" Oswald said. "That was a real version." "Not really," Dad said. "I mean, it was set in the same universe as the real version, but it was kind of a cheap knockoff of the one that came out when I was a kid." Dad always had to be so opinionated. He could never just watch something and enjoy it. "So the best movies are always the ones where you watched when you were a kid," Oswald said. "Not always, but in this case, yes." Dad was settling in. Oswald could tell for one of his favorite things, a good argument. "But the special effects in the original version stink," Oswald said, "and those puppets and rubber masks. I'll take a puppet or a model over CGI any day," Dad said, leaning back on the couch and propping his feet on the coffee table. "That stuff is so slick and thick. It's got no warmth, no texture, and besides, you like those old Zendrelix movies, and the special effects in those are terrible." "Yeah, but I watched those to make fun of them," Oswald said, even though he really did think Zendrelix was pretty cool. Mom came in from the kitchen with bowls of ice cream, not as good as the waffle cone place, but nothing to turn your nose up at either. "Okay, if you guys don't cut out the nerd argument, I'm going to pick the next movie we watch, and it's going to be a romantic comedy," Oswald said. Oswald and his dad shut up immediately. "That's what I thought," Mom said, passing around the bowls of ice cream. As Oswald was laying in bed, sketching his mechanical animals, his phone vibrated on his nightstand. There was only one person other than his parents who ever texted him. "Hey," Ben had typed on the screen. "Hey, back," Oswald typed. "How's your summer?" "Awesome, at Myrtle Beach for vacation. It's so cool. Arcades and mini golf everywhere." "Jealous," Oswald typed. And he meant it. A beach with arcades and mini golf already did sound awesome. A golf really did sound awesome. Wish you were here," Ben typed. "Me too." "How's your summer?" "Okay," Oswald texted. He was briefly tempted to make his summer sound cooler than it was, but he could never lie to Ben. "Been going to the library a lot, lunch at Jeff's Pizza." "That's all?" It did sound pathetic compared with a family trip to the beach. He texted, "Pretty much, yeah." "I'm sorry," Ben texted, and then, "That pizza place is creepy." They chatted a little while longer, and although Oswald was happy to hear from Ben, he was also sad that his friend was so far away and having such a good time without him. Monday morning, and Oswald was in a bad mood. Even his mom's pancakes didn't help. In the car, Dad turned up the radio too loud. It was some stupid song about a tractor. Oswald reached for the knob and turned it down. Hey dude, driver picks the music. You know that, Dad said. He turned the awful song back up even louder. It's bad music, Oswald said. I'm trying to save you from yourself. Well, I don't like those video game songs you listen to, Dad said, but I don't just barge into your room and turn them off. Yeah, Oswald said, but I don't force you to listen to them either. Dad turned the radio down. What's with the attitude, son? Whatever's bothering you, it's not just whatever's bothering you, it's not just that I like country music. That sentence is weird to me. But okay. Oswald didn't feel like talking, but clearly he was being forced to. And once he opened his mouth, he was surprised to feel complaints erupting from him like a lava volcano. I'm tired of every day being exactly the same. Ben texted me yesterday. He's at Myrtle Beach having an awesome time. He wanted to know what I was doing, and I told him I was going to the library and Jeff's Pizza every day. And you know what he texted me back? I'm sorry, and that pizza place is creepy. Dad sighed. I'm sorry we can't go on vacation and have an awesome time, Oz. Things are hard right now, where money's concerned. I'm sorry it affects you. You're a kid. You shouldn't have to worry about money. I'm hoping they'll move me to full-time at the store in the fall. That'll help a lot, and if I get promoted to deli manager, it'll be another $1.50 an hour. Oswald knew he shouldn't say what he was about to say, but here he went anyways. Ben's dad got a job that pays even better than his old job at the mill. Dad tightened his grip on the steering wheel. Yeah, well, Ben's dad had to move 500 miles away to get that job. His voice sounded tight as tight as a grip on the wheel, as tight as his grip on the wheel, and Oswald could tell his jaw was clenched. Your mom and I talked a lot about it, but we decided not to move, especially with your grandma living here and needing help sometimes. This is our home, kiddo, and things aren't perfect, but we just have to make the best of them. Oswald felt himself crossing the line from a grumbling. Oswald felt himself crossing the line from grumbling into grounding territory. But why did some people get the best of everything and others had to settle for free library visits and cheap pizza? And so every day you toss me out on the street like garbage. If this is the best of things, I'd hate to see the worst. Now, son, don't you think that's a little dramatic? Oswald didn't stick around to hear the rest of Dad's criticism. He got out of the car and slammed the door. His dad sped away, probably glad to get rid of him. Just as he had predicted, the library still didn't have the book he wanted. He flipped through a few magazines, the kinds with exotic jungle animals, which he usually liked, but they weren't doing much for him today. When his turn came for the computer, he put in his earbuds and watched some YouTube videos, but he wasn't in a good enough mood to laugh. At lunchtime, he sat in Jeff's Pizza with his slice and soda, every day a cheese slice. If his dad wasn't so stingy, he'd give him another $1 so he could have a pepperoni or sausage, but no, it had to be the cheapest pizza you could get. Sure, money was tight, but really, was another $1 a day going to break the bank? Looking around the place, Oswald decided Ben was right. Jeff Pizza was creepy. There were those shadowy, painted-over figures on the walls, the dusty, abandoned ball pit, and when he thought about it, Jeff was kind of creepy, too. He looked 100 years old, but probably just 30. But he was probably just 30. With those heavy-lidded, bloodshot eyes, the stained apron, and the slow speech and movement, he was like a zombie pizza chef. Oswald thought about his argument with Dad that morning. Soon, Dad would be texting him, expecting him to come outside to the car. Well, today was going to be different. Today, Dad would have to come in and find him. There was one perfect place to hide. Oswald was going into the pit. The pit was pretty gross, really. Obviously untouched for years. The plastic spheres were covered in a gray, fuzzy dust, but hiding there would be a great prank on his dad. His dad, who was always dropping him off and picking him up like somebody's dry cleaning, would actually have to get out of the car and make an effort for a change. Oswald wouldn't make it easy for him either. Oswald took off his shoes. Yes, the ball pit was disgusting, but at least getting into it would make different from all the other days that had come before. He had climbed into the pit and felt the balls parting to make room for his body. He moved his arms and legs. It was a little like swimming if you could swim in dry plastic spheres. He found his footing at the bottom of the pit. Some of the balls were strangely sticky, but he tried not to think about why. If he was going to trick his dad, he was going to have to go all the way under. He shook, took a deep breath as if he were about to jump into a swimming pool, and fell to his knees. That put him in up to his neck. Wiggling around so he was sitting on the pit's floor, put his head under too. The balls spread far apart enough that he could breathe, but it was dark and made him feel claustrophobic. The place stank of dust and mildew. Pink eye. He could hear his mother's voice saying, "You're going to get pink eye." The smell was really getting to him. The dust tickled his nose. He felt a sneeze coming on, but he couldn't move his hand through the spheres fast enough to reach his nose and muffle it. He sneezed 3 times, each one louder than the one before. Oswald didn't know if his dad was looking for him yet, but if he was, the sneezing ball pit had probably given away his location. Besides, it was too dark and too gross in there. He had to come up for air. As he rose, his ears were assaulted by the sound of beeping electronics and yelling and laughing kids. It took a few seconds for his eyes to adjust from the darkness of the pit brightness and that surrounded him, the flashing lights and vivid colors. He looked around and muttered, "Toto, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore." The walls were lined with shiny arcade cabinets, housing games he'd heard his dad talk about from his own childhood. Miss Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, Frogger, Cubert, Galga. A neon light clawed machine displayed plush blue elf-like creatures and orange cartoon cats. He looked down at the pit and realized he was surrounded by little kids wallowing in the strangely clean and now brightly colored plastic orbs. He stood over the preschoolers like a giant. He stepped out of the pit to find his shoes, but they were gone. Standing on the colorful carpet in his sock feet, he looked around. There were a lot of kids his age and younger, but there was nothing different about them. Everyone's hair was styled and fluffy, and the boys wore polo shirts and colors lots of guys wouldn't be caught dead in, like pink or aqua. The girls' hair was almost unbelievably big, with bangs that stood out from their foreheads like claws. They wore pastel-colored tops that matched their pastel-colored shoes. The colors, the lights, the sounds. It was a sensory overload. And was that music? Oswald looked over to see where it was coming from. Across the room on a small stage, a trio of animatronic animals blinked their big blank eyes, opened and closed their mouths, and pivoted back and forth in sync with a jangly, annoying song. There was a brown bear, a blue rabbit with a red bow tie, and some kind of bird girl. That's them! They reminded Oswald of the mechanical animals he had caught himself drawing lately. The difference was that he could never decide if the animals in his drawings were cute or creepy. These were creepy. Strangely, though, the dozen or so little kids surrounding the stage didn't seem to think so. They were wearing birthday party hats with pictures of characters on them and dancing and laughing and having a great time. When the smell of pizza hit Oswald's nose, he understood. He was still at Jeff's Pizza, more accurately what Jeff's Pizza had been before Jeff took over. The ball pit was new and not roped off. All the outlets on the walls had arcade games plugged into them, and he turned around to face the left wall in the shapes of shadows. On the wall of Jeff's Pizza was a mirror of the same characters, performing on the stage. The brown bear, the blue rabbit, and the girl bird. Was Foxy like a later on animatronic then? Interesting. I didn't know that. Below their faces were the words, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. They said it. They said it. They said Freddy Fazbear. Anyways, Oswald's insides turned to ice water. How had this happened? He knew where he was, but he didn't know when it was or how he got here. Somebody bumped into him, and he jumped more than was normal. Since he felt the physical contact, this must have not been a dream. He couldn't decide if this fact was good news or not. Sorry, dude, the kid said. He was about Oswald's age, and he was wearing a light yellow polo with the collar turned up, tucked into what looked like a pair of dad jeans. The white tennis shoes he had on were huge, like clown shoes. He looked as if he had spent a long time fixing his hair. Are you okay? Yeah, sure, Oswald said. He wasn't sure if he was okay, actually, but he didn't know how to begin to explain the situation. I've not seen you here before, the kid said. Yeah, Oswald said, trying to figure out an explanation that wouldn't sound too weird. I'm just visiting here, staying with my grandma for a few weeks. This place is great, though, all these old games. Old games, the kid said, raising an eyebrow. You're joking, right? I don't know where you're from, but Freddy's has the newest games around here. That's why the lines to play are so long. Oh yeah, I was just kidding, Oswald said, because he couldn't think of anything else to say. He had heard his dad talk about playing a lot of these games when he was a kid. Absurdly hard games, he said, on which he had wasted many hours and many quarters. I'm Chip, the kid said, running his fingers through his poofy hair. Me and my buddy Mike, he nodded at a tall black kid wearing huge eyeglasses and a shirt with wide red and blue strips. We're about to play some skee ball. Want to come with? Sure, Oswald said. It was nice to hang out with some other kids, even if they seemed to be kids from another time. He didn't think this was a dream, but it sure was a weird one. You got a name? Mike said, looking at Oswald like he was some kind of strange specimen. Oh, sure, I'm Oswald. He said he had been too worried about trying to remember. He had been too weirded out to remember to introduce himself. Mike gave him a friendly slap on the back. Well, I've gotta warn you, Oswald. I'm a beast at skee-ball, but I'll go easy on you since you're new here. These kids, I don't know why they make me laugh. Thanks for having mercy on me, Oswald said. He followed them to the skee-ball area. On the way, they passed somebody in a rabbit suit that looked like a yellow version of the animatronic rabbit on stage. Not the yellow rabbit, okay? Nobody else seemed to be paying attention to the rabbit guy, so Oswald didn't say anything. It was probably a Freddy Fazbear's employees dressed up to entertain the little kids at the birthday party. Mike wasn't kidding about being a beast at skee-ball. He easily beat Chip and Oswald 3 times, but he was a good sport, and they spent the whole time joking around. It felt good being included. Sorry. But after a couple of games, Oswald started to worry. What time was it really? How long had his dad been looking for him? And how was he going to get back to his real life? Sure, he'd wanted to give Dad a little scare, but he didn't want to scare the old man to so much that he got the police involved. Hey guys, I'd better run, Oswald said. My grandma, he almost said, just texted me, but realized Chip and Mike had no idea what he was talking about. Whenever this was, there was no cell phones. My grandma's supposed to pick me up in a few minutes. Okay, dude, maybe we'll catch you later, Chip said, and Mike gave a little nod and a wave. Oswald left his companions, stood in the corner of his sock feet, and wondered what to do. He was having some kind of magical experience. He was late getting back, and he was missing his shoes. He was like some kind of mixed up guy in Cinderella. How to get back? He could walk out of the front of the store of the Freddy Fazbear's, but where would that take him? That might be the right place to find his dad car waiting, but it wasn't the right time, not even the right decade. When it dawned on him, maybe the way out was the same way he got in. At the ball pit, A mom was telling her two little kids it was time to leave. They tried to argue with her, but she turned on her stern mom voice and threatened them with an early bedtime. Once they got out, he got in. He sank beneath the surface before anybody could see that a kid over the height limit was in the ball pit. How long to stay under? Randomly, he decided to count to 100, then stand. He rose to his feet and found himself standing in the dusty, roped-off ball pit at Jeff's Pizza. He climbed out and found his shoes right where he had left them. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He took it out and it read, "We'll be there in 2 minutes." Had no time passed at all? He headed out of the door and Jeff called, "See a kid," behind him. "This looks great, Mom," Oswald said, spreading the sausage link with his fork. "You're in a good mood today," Mom said. Mom slid a waffle onto his plate. "Quite a contrast from yesterday when you were Mr. Grumpy Pants." "Yeah," Oswald said. "They're supposed to get my book in the library today." This statement was true, but it wasn't the reason why Oswald was in a good mood. Of course, it wasn't like he could tell her the real reason. If he had said, "I discovered a ball pit at Jeff's Pizza that would let me time travel," Mom would be dropping the waffles and picking up the phone to call the nearest child psychologist. Oswald picked up his book at the library, but was too impatient to read it. He headed over to Jeff's Pizza as soon as it opened at 11. Jeff was in the kitchen when he got there, so he made a beeline for the pit. He shucked off his shoes, stepped in, and sank to the depths. Since it had seemed to work before, he counted to 100 before he stood up. The animatronic man was playing some weird jangly song that was partially drowned out by the beeping, blipping, and dinging of a variety of games. He wandered the floor and took in the video games. The whack-a-mole, the neon-lighted token suckers that let you win some tickets, but probably not a lot. If you pushed the buttons at the right time, older kids crowded around the video games. Preschoolers climbed on the crayon-colored play equipment. Pink eye, Oswald thought, though he had no room to talk, the way he was diving into the ball pit these days. Everything looked as it had before. He even caught sight of a calendar hanging in an open office that helped him pinpoint the date, 1985. Hey, it's Oswald. Chip was wearing a baby blue polo with his dad jeans and giant sneakers this time. Not a hair on his head was out of place. "Oh, hey, Oz," Mike said. He was wearing a Back to the Future t-shirt. Anybody ever call you that? Like the Wizard of Oz?" "They do now," Oz said, grinning. He had gone from having the loneliest summer ever to having 2 new friends and a nickname. True, all of these things seemed to be happening in the mid-1980s, but why get hung up on the details? "Hey," Chip said, "we just ordered pizza. Want to come have some? We ordered a large, so there's more than we can eat." "Speak for yourself," Mike said, but he was grinning. "Okay," Chip said. "How about I say it's more than we should eat? Want to join us?" Oswald was curious about how Freddy Fazbear's pizzas compared with Jeff's. "Sure, thanks." On the way to their table, they passed someone in that same yellow rabbit suit who was standing in a corner, still as a statue. Chip and Mike either didn't see him or ignored him, so Oswald tried to ignore him as well. Why hide in a corner like that, though? If he worked for the restaurant, surely he wasn't supposed to act all creepy. Wait, why is my heart kind of racing? At the table, a young woman with big blonde hair and blue eyeshadow served them a large pizza and a pitcher of soda. In the background, the animatronic band played on. The pizza was pepperoni and sausage with a crispy crust and a nice change from the plain cheese slices. "You know," Mike said, "between these bites, when I was little, I loved Freddy Fazbear's band." "Oh, wait. You know what?" Mike said between bites. "When I was little, I loved Freddy Fazbear's band. I even had a stuffed Freddy I used to sleep with." Psychic friend Fredbear? Hmm? Now I look up at the stage and those things give me the creeps. It's weird, huh? How the stuff you like as a little kid gets creepy when you're older. Chip helped himself to another slice. Like clowns. Yeah, or dolls, Mike said between bites. Sometimes I look at my little sister's doll all lined up on the shelf in her room, and it's like they're staring at me. Or like that guy in the yellow rabbit costume. Oswald thought, but he didn't say anything. After they demolished the pizza, they painted some ski. They played some skee ball. Mike mopping the floor with them again, but being really nice about it. Oswald didn't worry about time anymore because apparently time here didn't pass the same way as in his own time zone. After skee ball, they took turns playing air hockey in pairs. Oswald was surprisingly decent at it and even managed to beat Mike once. When they started to run low on tokens, Oswald thanked them for sharing their wealth and said he hoped to see them again soon. After they said their goodbyes, Oswald waited until no one was looking and disappeared into the pit. Hanging out with Chip and Mike turned into a regular thing. Today they weren't even playing games. They were just sitting in a booth, drinking sodas and talking, trying to ignore the animatronic animals' annoying music as much as they could. You know what movie I liked? Chip said. His polo shirt was peach-colored today. Oswald loved the guy, but really, didn't he own a shirt that wasn't the color of an Easter egg? The Eternal Song. Seriously, Mike said, pushing his huge glasses up on his nose. That movie was so boring. I was like, The Eternal Song is a perfect title for this movie because I don't think it's ever going to end. They all laughed, and then Chip said, What did you think of it, Oz? I haven't seen that one, Oswald said. He said that a lot when hanging out with Chip and Mike. Oswald always listened to them talk about movies and shows they liked. When they mentioned one he didn't know, he'd look it up online when he got home. He made a list of 80s movies he wanted to watch and checked the TV listings on the DVR to see when any of them might be showing. Oswald participated in Chip and Mike's conversations as much as he could. It was kind of like being a foreign exchange student. He sometimes had to fake his way through by smiling and nodding and being generally agreeable. Man, you need to get out more, Mike said. Maybe you can go to the movies with Chip and me sometime. That'd be cool, Oswald said. But what else would he say? Actually, I'm from the distant future, and I don't think that it's physically possible for me to see you anyplace but in this Freddy Fazbear's in 1985. They'd both think that it was a joke on Mike because his favorite movie was Back to the Future. Name one movie you've seen that you really like. Chip said to Oswald. I'm trying to figure out what your taste is. Oswald's mind went blank. What was a movie from the 80s? E.T.? E.T.? Mike slapped the table, laughing. E.T. was like 3 years ago. You really do need to get out more. Do they not have movie theaters where you're from? They do, Oswald thought, and they have Netflix and PlayStation and YouTube and social media, but he didn't say it. It's so weird to hear a book say that anyways. Of course there was technology Chip and Mike talked about that he had only the biggest knowledge of, like VCRs and boomboxes and cassette tapes. And he constantly had to remind himself not to talk about things like cell phones and tablets and the internet. He tried not to wear t-shirts with characters and references that might confuse them or the other customers at the 1985 Freddy Fazbear's. Yeah, we definitely need to bring you up to date, Chip said. If you only knew, Oswald thought. Hey, do you want to go play some more games, Mike said. I feel the skee ball calling me, but I promise I'll go easy on you guys. Chip laughed. No, you won't. You'll murder us. You guys go ahead, Oswald said. I think I'll just stay at the table. What? And watch the show? Mike said, nodding in the direction of the creepy characters on stage. Is something wrong? If you've suddenly decided you like Freddy Fazbear's music, we need to get you help fast. No, nothing's wrong, Oswald said, but something was. For his first few visits to the 1985 Freddy Fazbear's, it hadn't even occurred to him that he was basically mooching off of Chip and Mike's generosity because he never had any money of his own. And even if he wasn't broke in his own time zone, would money he brought from the present day even work in 1985? It was kind of pitiful being broke in 2 decades. Finally, he said, I just feel like I'm always taking your money because I never have any. Hey dude, it's cool, Chip said. We hadn't even noticed. Yeah, Mike said. We just figured your grandma never gave you any money. I know my grandma doesn't except for when it's my birthday. They were being really nice, but Oswald still felt embarrassed. If they had talked about his lack of money, that meant they had noticed it. How how about I just go hang out with you while you play, Oswald said. When he stood up, he felt a strange heaviness in his pockets. Something in them was too heavy. He felt like his dreams might fall down. He reached into his pockets and pulled out double handfuls of 1985's Freddy Fazbear game tokens. He produced handful after handful and dumped them on the table. Or we could all play using these, he said. He had no idea how to explain the magic that just occurred. I guess I forgot I was wearing these pants, the ones that had all the tokens in them. Chip and Mike looked a little confused, but then they grinned and started taking coins from the table into their empty soda cups. Oswald did the same. He decided just to go with the weirdness. He didn't know how the tokens had gotten there, but then again, he didn't really know how he had gotten there either. We're on page 40. We might just finish this story because I'm very excited to see how it ends. In the morning, as Dad was driving him to the library, Oswald asked, Dad, how old were you in 1985? I was just a couple of years older than you, Dad said. And other than baseball, all I could think about was how many quarters I had to spend at that arcade. Why do you ask? No reason in particular, Oswald said. I've just been doing some research. Jeff's Pizza, back before it was Jeff's Pizza, it was some kind of arcade, wasn't it? Yeah, it was. Dad's voice sounded strange. Nervous, maybe. He was quiet for a few seconds, then said, But it closed. Like everything else in this town, Oswald said. Pretty much, yeah, Dad said, pulling up in front of the library. Maybe it was Oswald's imagination, but it seemed like his dad was relieved to get to their destination so he wouldn't have to answer any more questions. At 11 o'clock sharp, Oswald headed over to Jeff's Pizza, as had become his habit. When Jeff's nowhere in sight, Oswald proceeded to the pit. After his count to 100, he stood. There were noises, but not the usual ones of Freddy Fazbear's screams, crying children, yells for help, the fast footfalls of people running, chaos. Were Chip and Mike here? Were they okay? Was anybody here okay? He was afraid. Part of him wanted to disappear back into the pit, but he was worried about his friends. Also, he was burning with curiosity about what was going on, even though he knew whatever it was horrible. He wasn't in danger, he told himself, because this was the past, a time way before he was born. His life couldn't be in danger in a time before he even existed, could it? His stomach in knots. He moved through the crowd, past crying mothers running with their toddlers in their arms, past dads grasping their children's hand and leading them swiftly towards the exit, their faces masks of shock. Chip? Mike? He called, but his friends were nowhere to be seen. Maybe they hadn't come to Freddy Fazbear's today. Maybe they were safe. Scared, but feeling as if he had to know what was happening, Oswald walked into the opposite direction from everyone else, with an escalating feeling of dread. In front of him stood the man in the yellow bunny costume. If it was a man under there. The bunny opened a door that said private and went inside. Oswald followed. The corridor was long and dark. The rabbit looked at him with blank eyes and an unchanging grin, then walked further down the hall. Oswald wasn't chasing the rabbit. He was letting the rabbit lead him, as if he were in a terrifying version of Alice in Wonderland, going down the rabbit hole. The rabbit stopped in front of a door with a sign reading "Party Room" and beckoned for Oswald to come inside. Oswald was shaking with terror, but he was too curious to refuse. Besides, he kept thinking, "You can't hurt me. I haven't even been born." Once inside the room, it took Oswald a few seconds to register what he was actually seeing, and a few more seconds for his brain to process it. They were lined up against the wall, which was painted with images of the place's mascots: the grinning bear, the blue bunny, the bird girl. Half a dozen kids, none of them older than Oswald, their lifeless bodies propped into sitting positions, their legs stretched out in front of them. Some of them had their eyes closed, as if asleep. Others' eyes were open, frozen in an empty doll-like stare. They were all wearing Freddy Fazbear's birthday party hats. Oswald couldn't tell how they had died, but he knew the rabbit was responsible for it. The rabbit had wanted him to see his handiwork. Maybe the rabbit wanted Oswald to be his next victim, to join the others lined up against the wall with their unseeing eyes. Oswald screamed. The yellow rabbit lunged for him, and he ran out of the room and down back the corridor. Maybe the rabbit could hurt him. Maybe he couldn't. Oswald didn't want to hang around long enough to find out. He ran across the now empty arcade toward the ball pit. Outside, the police sirens screamed. The police siren's screams matched Oswald's own. I'm sorry, I'm like whistling through my teeth. The rabbit ran after him, getting so close that a fuzzy paw brushed Oswald's back. Oswald dove into the pit. He counted to 100 as fast as he could. When he stood, the first thing he heard was Jeff's voice. "There's the little stinker." Oswald turned to see his dad stomping towards him. While Jeff looked on, Dad looked furious, and Jeff didn't look happy either. Not that he ever did. Oswald stood frozen, too overwhelmed to move. His dad grabbed his arm and pulled him out of the pit. "What were you thinking hiding in that nasty old thing?" Dad said. "Didn't you hear me calling you?" After Oswald was out, his dad leaned over the pit. "Look how dirty this is. Your mother..." A pair of yellow arms reached out of the pit and pulled Dad under. The struggle would have been cartoonish if it hadn't been so terrifying. Dad's feet, in their brown work boots, kicked up to the surface, only to disappear below. Then a pair of big, fuzzy yellow feet appeared, only to disappear too. The bowls in the pit roiled like a stormy sea. And then they were still. The yellow rabbit rose from the pit, adjusting his purple bow tie, brushed off his front, and turned toward Oswald, grinning. Oswald backed away, but the rabbit was beside him, his arm firmly around Oswald's shoulders, guiding him towards the exit. Oswald looked at Jeff, who stood behind the counter. Maybe Jeff would help him, but Jeff wore the same hangdog expression he always wore, and just said, "See you later, guys." How could anyone act like the situation was normal? Once the rabbit got him outside, he opened the passenger door of Dad's car and pushed Oswald in. Oswald watched as the bunny buckled its seat and started the car. He tried to open the door, but the bunny had activated the power lock from the driver's side. The bunny's mouth was frozen in a rictus grin. Its eyes stared blankly. Oswald pushed the unlock button again, even though he knew it wouldn't work. "Wait," Oswald said. "Can you do any of this? Can you even drive a car?" The bunny said nothing, but started the car and pulled into the street. It stopped at a red light, so Oswald figured it must be able to see and must know know the basic rules of driving. "What did you do to my dad? Where are you taking me?" Oswald could hear the panic in his voice. He wanted to sound strong and brave, like he was standing up for himself, but instead he sounded like scared and confused, which he was. The bunny said nothing. The car made a familiar right turn, then a familiar left into Oswald's neighborhood. "How do you know where I live?" Oswald demanded. Still silent, the bunny turned into the driveway in front of Oswald's ranch-styled house. "I'll run for it," Oswald thought. "As soon as this thing unlocks the car door, I'll run into a neighbor's house and call the police. Once I'm safely inside." The locks clicked, and Oswald jumped out of the car. Somehow the bunny was standing right in front of him. It grabbed his arms. He tried to break free, but the grip was too strong. The bunny dragged Oswald to the front door, then yanked off the chain around Oswald's neck that held his house key. The rabbit turned the key in the door and shoved Oswald inside. Then it stood in front of the door, blocking the exit. Jinx the cat wandered into the living room, took one look at the rabbit, arched her back, puffed out her tail, and hissed like a cat on Halloween decorations. Oswald had never seen her act scared or unfriendly before, and he watched as she turned tail and fled down the hall. If Jinx knew this situation was bad, it must be really bad. "You can't do this," Oswald said to the rabbit in tears. He didn't want to cry. He wanted to look strong, but he couldn't help it. This is kidnapping or something. Mom will be home soon, and she'll call the police." It was a total bluff, of course. Mom wouldn't be home until after midnight. Would he even be alive by the time Mom got home? Was his dad even alive now? He knew the bunny would grab him if he tried to make a run for the back door. "I'm going to my room now, okay? I'm not trying to escape. I'm just going to my room." He backed away, and the bunny let him. As soon as he got inside his room, he slammed the door and locked it. He took a deep breath and tried to think. There was a window in his room, but it was high and too small to climb through. Under his bed, Jinx let out a low growl. Oswald could hear the bunny outside his door. If he made a phone call, it would hear him, but maybe he could send a text. He took out his phone with shaking hands, texted, "Mom, emergency. Something's wrong with Dad. Come home now." Oswald knew, even as he texted, that she wouldn't be coming home now, because she was always dealing with medical emergencies at work. Sometimes it took her a long time to check her phone. It was Dad who Oswald was supposed to contact in event of emergency, but obviously that wasn't going to work now. A miserable hour passed until Oswald's phone vibrated. Afraid the rabbit might still be listening outside his locked door, he picked up without saying hello. "Oswald, what's going on?" Mom sounded terrified. "Do I need to call 911? "I can't talk right now," Oswald whispered. "I'm on my way home, okay?" She hung up. 15 minutes seemed to pass more slowly than Oswald thought was possible. Then there was a knock at Oswald's door. Oswald jumped, his heart in his throat. "Who is it?" "It's me," Mom said, sounding exasperated. "Open the door." He opened the door just a crack to make sure it was really her. Once he let her in, he closed and locked the door behind her. "Oswald, you need to tell me what's going on." Mom's brow was furrowed with worry. Where to start? How to explain without sounding crazy? "It's Dad. He's not okay. I'm not even sure where he is." Mom put her hand on both of his shoulders. "Oswald, I just saw your dad. He's lying on the bed in our room watching TV. He made you a chicken pot pie for dinner. It's sitting on the stove." "What? I'm not hungry." He tried to wrap his mind around his mom's words. "You saw Dad?" Mom nodded. She was looking at him like he was one of her patients instead of like her kid. Like she was trying to figure out what was wrong with him. "And he's okay?" She nodded again. "He's okay, but I'm worried about you." She put a hand on his forehead as if checking for a fever. "I'm okay," Oswald said. "I mean, if Dad's okay, I'm okay. He just didn't seem okay." "Maybe it's good school starting back. I think you're spending too much time by yourself." What could he say? "Actually, I've been spending time with my new friends in 1985. "Maybe so, I probably should just go to bed. I have to get an early start in the morning. I don't think that's a good idea, Mom said. She put her hands on her cheeks and looked at him directly in the eyes. And listen, if you're going to text me at work, make sure it's a real emergency. You scared me. I thought it was a real emergency. I'm sorry. It's alright, honey. Get some rest, okay? Okay. After Mom left, Oswald looked under the bed. Jinx was still there, crouched in a ball, as if, like she was trying to make herself as small and invisible as possible, her eyes wide and looking terrified. It's okay, Jinxie, Oswald said, reaching under the bed and wiggling his fingers at her. Mom says it's safe. You can come out now. The cat wouldn't budge. Oswald lay awake in bed. If Mom said Dad was there and okay, then it must be true. Why would she lie? But Oswald knew what he had seen. He had seen that yellow thing. He had started to think of it, dragging Dad into the pit. He had seen the yellow thing climb out of the pit, had felt its grip on his arm, sat beside it in the car as it drove him home. Or had he? If Mom said Dad was home and okay, he must be. Oswald trusted his mom, but if Dad was okay, it meant Oswald hadn't seen what he had thought he had saw, and that must mean that Oswald was losing his mind. After only a few hours of fitful sleep, Oswald awoke to the aroma of frying ham and baking biscuits. His stomach rumbled, reminding him that he had missed dinner last night. Everything felt normal. Maybe he should just treat yesterday like a bad dream and try to move forward. A new school year, a new beginning. He stopped in the bathroom, then made his way to the kitchen. Feeling better, Mom asked. There she was, her hair in a ponytail, wearing her pink fuzzy bathrobe, fixing breakfast just like always. Something about this fact made Oswald feel tremendously relieved. Yeah, he said, I'm pretty hungry, actually. Now that's a problem I can fix, Mom said. She set down a plate with 2 ham biscuits on it and poured him a glass of orange juice. Oswald ate the first ham biscuits in 3 bites. The yellow thing walked in and sat across from him at the breakfast table. Mom? Oswald's heartbeat felt like a jackhammer in his chest. The ham biscuits sat heavy in his churning stomach. What is it, hon? Her back was turned as she fiddled with the coffee maker. Where's Dad? She turned around, the coffee pot in her hand. Oswald, your dad is sitting right across from you. If this is some kind of elaborate prank, you can cut it out right now, because it's officially stopped being funny. She poured a cup of coffee and set it down in front of the yellow thing, which stared ahead, its mouth set in an unchanging grin. Oswald knew he wasn't getting anywhere. Either he was insane or his mom was. Okay, I understand. I'll cut it out. I apologize. May I be excused so I can get ready for school? Of course, Mom said, but she was looking at him kind of funny again. Oswald stopped in the bathroom to brush his teeth and went to his room to get his backpack. He peeked under his bed to find Jinx still hiding there. Well, it's good to know there's somebody else in this family who has some sense, he said. When Oswald came back into the kitchen, the yellow thing was standing by the door, car keys in its paw. Is, Dad taking me to school? Oswald asked. He didn't know if he could bear sitting beside it in the car again, hoping it was watching the roads as it stared through the windshield with its empty eyes. Doesn't he always? Mom said. He could hear the worry in her voice. Have a good day, okay? Seeing no choice, Oswald got in the car beside the yellow thing. Once again, it locked all the doors from the driver's side. It backed out of the driveway and passed a jogging neighbor who waved at it just as if it were his dad. I don't understand, Oswald said on the edge of tears. Are you real? Is this real? Am I going crazy? The yellow thing said nothing. It just stared at the road ahead. When it pulled up in front of Westbrook Middle School, the crossing guard and the kids at the crosswalk didn't seem to notice that the car was being driven by a giant yellow rabbit. "Hey," Oswald said before he got out of the car, "don't bother picking me up this afternoon. I'll catch the bus." The school bus was a big yellow thing he could handle, but it was some kind of cosmic law that the first person Oswald saw in the hall was Dylan, his tormentor. Well, 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 if it isn't Oswald the Os. Give it a rest, Dylan, Oswald said, pushing past him. I've got way bigger problems than you today. It was impossible to concentrate in class. Usually Oswald was a pretty decent student, but how could he focus with his life and possibility his sanity falling apart? Maybe he should talk to somebody, the school counselor or the school police officer, but he knew anything that came out of his mouth would sound dangerously crazy. How could he convince a police officer that his dad was missing if everybody who looked at the yellow thing saw Oswald's dad? There was no one to help him. Oswald was going to have to figure out how to solve this problem himself. At recess, he sat on a bench by the playground, grateful he didn't have to pretend to listen to a teacher and could just think. He couldn't imagine how his life could get any weirder. The yellow thing seemed to think it was his father. This was weird enough, but did everybody else think it was his father too? Do you mind if I share your bench? It was a girl Oswald had never seen before. She had curly black hair and big brown eyes and was holding a thick book. Sure, help yourself, Oswald said. The girl sat on the opposite end of the bench and opened her book. Oswald went back to his confusing thoughts. Have you gone to this school for a long time? The girl asked him after a few minutes. She didn't look over at Oswald when she talked. She just kept staring at the pages of her book. Oswald wondered if this meant she was shy. Since kindergarten, Oswald said. And then, because he couldn't think of a single other thing to say about himself, he asked, What are you reading? Greek mythology, she said. Tales of heroes. Have you read much mythology? No, not really, he said, feeling stupid immediately after. He didn't want to give the impression that he was the kind of guy who never read books. In desperation, he added, I love to read, though, and then felt even stupider. Me too, she said. I've probably read this book a dozen times. It's like a comfort book for me. I read it when I need to be brave. The word brave struck a chord in Oswald. Brave was what he needed to be. Why's that? Well, the Greek heroes are super brave. They're always doing battle with some kind of big monster, like the Minotaur or the Hydra. It kind of puts things in perspective, you know? No matter how bad my problems are, at least I don't have to battle with a monster. Yeah, Oswald said, even though he was trying to figure out how to battle with a monster, a yellow, long-eared monster, in his own home. He couldn't tell this girl about the yellow thing, though. She would think that he was crazy and would be leaving their shared bench in a hurry. So you said you read books when you need to be brave. He was surprised he was having this conversation, given the way his mind was racing. For some reason, this girl was easy to talk to. I mean, it may be none of my business, but I was wondering why you needed to be brave. She gave a little smile. First day at a new school, third day in a new town. I don't know anybody yet. Yes, you do, he said. He held out his hand. I'm Oswald. He didn't know why he was offering his hand like he was some kind of businessman, but it felt like the right thing to do. She took his hand and shook it surprisingly firmly. I'm Gabrielle. Somehow this was the conversation Oswald needed to have. We're on page 54, so we're literally like 9 pages away from finishing. He took the bus home from school. When he came inside, the yellow thing was vacuuming the living room. He didn't ask it any questions. It wasn't as if it could give him answers anyway. And besides, if he was going to make his plan work, he was going to have to act like everything was normal. And as anybody who had seen him in the 4th grade class play knew, acting was not one of his talents. Instead, he did what he was supposed to do when life was normal, when the real dad was vacuuming the living room. He got the feather duster out of the cleaning closet and dusted the coffee table, the end tables, and the lamps. He tidied up the wastebasket and the throw pillows on the couch. Then he went into the kitchen and took out the garbage and the recycling. Once he was outside, he was tempted to run, but he knew running was not the answer. If everybody saw the yellow thing as his dad, nobody would help him. The yellow thing would always catch him. He went back inside. His chores done, he walked right past the yellow thing. I'm going to chill out a while before dinner, he said, even though the possibility of relaxing in any way was unimaginable. He went to his room, but he didn't close the door. Instead, he took off his shoes, sprawled on the bed, and started drawing in his sketchbook. He didn't want to draw mechanical animals, but they seemed to be all that he could draw. He shut his sketchbook and started reading a manga, or at least pretending to. Normal. The plan could only work if he acted like everything was normal. When the rabbit appeared in his doorway, he managed not to gasp. It beckoned for him the same way it did when it led him into the murder room at Freddy Fazbear's, and he followed it into the kitchen. On the table there was one grocery store pizza his dad kept in the freezer, baked into a pleasing golden brown, and 2 glasses of the fruit punch Oswald liked. The pizza had already been sliced, which was a relief because Oswald couldn't imagine what he would have done if he had seen the thing holding a knife. Run screaming out into the street, probably. Oswald sat down at the table and helped himself to a slice of pizza. He didn't feel much like eating, but he knew he couldn't act like anything was wrong. He took a bite of pizza, a sip of punch. Aren't you going to eat anything, Dad? He asked. It was hard calling that thing Dad, but he managed. The yellow thing sat across from him in silence, with its unblinking stare and frozen grin, an untouched pizza slice on a plate in front of it, besides an untouched glass of punch. Could it even eat? Oswald wondered. Did it need to? What was it anyway? At first he thought it was a guy in a suit, but now he wasn't too sure. It was some kind of highly sophisticated animatronic animal, or a real flesh and blood giant bunny. He didn't know which possibility was more disturbing. With great effort, he finished his pizza slice and glass of punch, then said, "Thanks for dinner, Dad. I'm going to get a glass of milk and go do my homework now." The yellow thing just sat there. Oswald went to the refrigerator. He checked to make sure the yellow thing wasn't watching and poured some milk into a bowl. Once he was in his room, he didn't close and lock the door because he wouldn't if he was home with Dad. Normal, so not to arouse suspicion. He slid a bowl of milk under his bed where Jinx was still hiding. "It's going to be okay, girl," he whispered. He hoped he was right. He sat on his bed and in a few minutes heard Jinx slapping the milk. He knew from past experience that even when terrified, she couldn't turn down dairy products. He made a half-hearted attempt at his homework, but he couldn't concentrate. All he could think about was his dad, the yellow thing that had dragged his dad into the pit and under the surface. Did this mean his dad was at Freddy Fazbear's circa 1985, wandering around an arcade of games he had played as a kid? That was the most likely explanation, unless the yellow thing had killed. No, he couldn't let himself think that. His dad was alive. He had to be. The only way to know was to go back into the pit. But the first thing he was going to have to get out of the house without the yellow thing noticing. Oswald waited in the dark, then waited some more. Finally, he grabbed his shoes and tiptoed out of his room and into the hall in his socked feet. The door to his parents' bedroom was open. He sneaked a glance aside as he crept past. The yellow thing was lying on his back on his parents' bed. It appeared to be staring at the ceiling. Or maybe it wasn't staring. Maybe it was asleep. It was hard to tell since its eyes didn't close. Did it even need to sleep? Holding his breath, he passed his parents' room and tiptoed into the kitchen. If the yellow thing caught him, he could always say that he was just getting a drink of water. The kitchen was the best escape route. The door there was less squeaky than the front door. I really hate when my teeth whistle. He slipped into his shoes and pulled the door open slowly, inch by inch. When it was open just wide enough, he slipped through and shut it softly behind him. Then he ran. He ran through his neighborhood and past neighbors walking their dogs, kids riding bicycles. Some people looked at Oswald strangely, and he couldn't figure out why. People ran in this neighborhood all the time, but then he realized he wasn't running like he was doing it for exercise. He was running like something was chasing him, and it might be. It was a long way to Jeff's Pizza on foot, and Oswald knew he couldn't keep up his pace all the way there. He slowed to a walk after he was out of the neighborhood and chose to walk side streets instead of the more direct route so that it'd be harder to follow. He was afraid of Jeff's Pizza might be closed by the time he reached it, but when he arrived, hot and out of breath, the lighted open sign was still on. Inside, Jeff was at the counter, watching a ball game on TV, but otherwise the place was empty. You know, we just served whole pizza that night. No slices, Jeff said, in his usual monotone. As always, he looked exhausted. Yeah, I just stopped by to get a soda to go, Oswald said, his gaze roaming to the roped-off ball pit. Jeff looked a little puzzled, but finally said, "Okay, let me get a pie out of the oven, then I'll get it out for you. Orange, right?" "Right. Thanks." As soon as Jeff disappeared into the kitchen, Oswald ran into the corner and dove into the pit. The familiar, musty smell filled his nose as he sank beneath the surface. He sat on the pit's floor. He counted to 100 as he always did, even though he wasn't sure it served any purpose in getting him to make the jump to Freddy Fazbear's in 1985. He shifted on the pit's floor and felt something solid press against his lower back. A shoe. It felt like a sole of a shoe. He scooted around and grabbed it. It was a boot, a steel-toed work boot, like his dad used to wear to work at the mill and now wore to his job at Snack Space. He moved his hand up a little. An ankle in the kind of thick boot sock his dad liked. He crawled further across the floor of the pit. The face. He had to feel the face. If it was some giant furry head like the big yellow thing, he might never stop screaming, but he had to find out. His hand found a shoulder. He reached to the chest and felt the cheap fabric of a white undershirt. He was shaking as he reached higher. He felt an unmistakably human face. Skin and stubble. A man's face. It was Dad, and he had to be alive. He had to be. Oswald had seen shows where people who had been in emergency situations suddenly developed amazing strength and found themselves able to lift the front end of a car or a tractor. This was the kind of strength Oswald needed to find. His dad wasn't a big man, but he was still a man and weighed at least twice as much as his son. He had to move his dad if he was going to save him. If this even was his dad, if this wasn't some kind of cruel hoax set up by the yellow thing to trap him. Oswald couldn't let himself think these thoughts, not if he was going to do what he had to do. He got behind the person, grabbed under his armpits and pulled. Nothing happened. Dead weight. Oswald thought, no, not dead. Please, not dead. He pulled again, this time with more force, making a noise that was somewhere between a grunt and a roar. This time the body moved, and Oswald pulled again, standing up and getting the person's head and shoulders above the surface. It was his dad, pale and unconscious, but breathing. Definitely breathing, and around him, not Freddy Fazbear's 1985, but the normal present-day weirdness of Jeff's Pizza. How could Oswald get him out? He could call Mom. As a nurse, she would know what to do, but if she thought he was crazy or lying, he felt like the boy who cried wolf or the boy who cried rabbit. He felt it before he saw it, the presence behind him, the awareness of something in his personal space. Before he could turn around, a pair of furry yellow arms locked around him in a fearsome embrace. He got his right arm free enough to jab his elbow into the yellow thing's midsection. He got loose, but the thing was blocking the exit to the pit. He couldn't get out of the pit himself, let alone with his poor passed-out dad. Acting more than thinking, Oswald charged at the rabbit with his head down. If he could just start off balance or knock it under the surface, maybe he could make it end up in 1985, Freddy Fazbear, and buy Oswald and his dad some time to escape. He headbutted the yellow thing and knocked it into the ropes and nettings that surrounded the ball pit. It stumbled a little, righted itself, and then, arms outreached, lunged towards Oswald. It pushed Oswald against the wall of the pit, his eyes dead as always. It unhinged its jaws to reveal double row of fangs and sharp scimitars. Mouth opened freakishly wide, it lunged for Oswald's throat, but he blocked it with his arm. Pain pierced Oswald's foreskin as the yellow thing sank its fangs into his skin. Oswald used his good arm to punch the rabbit hard in the face before the fangs pierced too deeply. Fangs. What kind of crazy rabbit had fangs? The thing's jaws released their grip, but there was no time to survey the damage because the thing lunged towards Oswald's dad, its jaws wide open, like a snake about to swallow its unsuspecting prey. Its fangs were red with Oswald's blood. Oswald elbowed the yellow thing aside and moved between it and his still conscious father. "You leave my dad alone," he yelled, then used the netting to bounce off and clamber onto the yellow thing's back. He hit its head with his fist, scratched at its eyes, which he didn't feel like a living creature's eyes. The rabbit stumbled back onto the netting and ropes, then grabbed Oswald's arms and swung him hard off its shoulders and into the pit. Oswald fell headfirst under the surface, grateful that the bottom of the pit was soft. His arm was throbbing, his whole body was exhausted, but he had to get up. He had to save his dad, like those ancient Greek heroes Gabrielle had told him about. He had to be brave and face the monster. Oswald rose steadily to his feet. Somehow, when it shook Oswald off, the yellow thing must have gotten tangled in the ropes and the nettings that lined the ball pit. A rope was looped around its neck, and it grasped the rope with its big paws, trying to get free. Oswald couldn't understand why it was failing to free itself until he saw that the yellow thing's feet weren't touching the floor of the pit. The yellow thing was suspended from the rope, which was tied securely to a metal rod at the top of the ball pit. The rabbit had hung itself. Its mouth was opening and closing like it was gasping for breath, but no sound came out. Its paws clawed desperately at the ropes. Its stare, still terrifying in its blankness, was aimed in Oswald's direction, as if it were asking him for help. Oswald certainly wasn't going to rescue it. After a few more seconds of struggling, the yellow thing was still. Oswald blinked. Hanging from the rope was nothing but a dirty, empty, yellow rabbit costume. His dad's eyes opened. Oswald rushed to his side. "I don't understand why I'm here," Dad said, his face pale and unshaven, his eyes puffy with dark half-moons under them. "What happened?" Oswald debated what to say. "You were attacked and left for dead by a giant evil rabbit who tried to replace you, and I was the only person who could see it wasn't you. Even Mom thought it was you." No, it sounded too crazy, and Oswald didn't relish the idea of spending years of therapy saying, "But the evil rabbit was real." Jinx was the only other member of the family who knew the truth, and being a cat, she wasn't going to say anything in his defense, Besides, his dad had already suffered enough. Oswald knew it was wrong to lie. He also knew that lying was not a skill he had. When he tried, he always got all nervous and sweaty and said, a lot. But in his situation, a lie might be the only way forward. He took a deep breath. So, I hid in the ball pit to play a prank on you, which I shouldn't have done. You came to look for me, and I guess you must have hit your head and lost consciousness. Oswald took a deep breath. I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean for things to get so out of hand. This part, at least, was the truth. I accept your apology, son, Dad said. He didn't sound mad, just tired. You're right. You shouldn't have done it, and Jeff really should get rid of this ball pit before he has a lawsuit on his hands. Definitely, Oswald said. He knew he could never set foot in the pit again. He would miss Chip and Mike, but he needed to make some friends in his own time. His mind flashed to the girl on the bench at recess, Gabrielle. She seemed nice, smart too. They had a good talk. Oswald reached for his dad's hand. Let me help you stand up. With Oswald steadying him, Dad rose to his feet and let his son lead him to the exit of the ball pit. He paused to look up at the hanging yellow costume. What is that creepy thing? I have no idea, said Oswald. This, too, was the truth. They climbed out of the pit and walked through Jeff's pizza. Jeff was wiping the counter, still watching the ball game on the restaurant's TV. Had he not seen or heard anything? Still holding Oswald's hand. When was the last time his dad held his hands? Dad lifted his son's arm and looked at it. You're bleeding. Yeah, Oswald said. I must have scraped my arms when I was trying to pull you out of the pit. His dad shook his head. Like I said, that thing is a public safety issue. Just sticking up a sign saying, keep out, isn't enough. He let go of Oswald's arm. We'll get your arm cleaned up at the house. Then your mom can dress the wound when she gets home from work. Oswald wondered what his mom would say when she saw the fang marks. As they approached the front door, Oswald said, Dad, I know I can be a pain sometimes, but I really do love you, you know. Dad looked at him with an expression that seemed both pleased and surprised. Same here, kiddo. He ruffled Oswald's hair. But you do have a terrible taste in science fiction movies. Oh, yeah? Oswald said, smiling. Well, you have a terrible taste in music. And you like boring ice cream. Together, they opened the door into the fresh night air. Behind them, Jeff called out, Hey, kid, you forgot your soda. The end. The next one's called To Be Beautiful. That sounds pretty cool, too. I didn't expect to read through the whole thing, to be honest, but I did. I don't know. It was, like, kind of slightly not satisfying. Like, I wish that, like, I don't know. It was exciting, though. And, like, it's exciting to see, like, because, like, this is the picture at the front, and that's, like, what the story was, like, about, you know? Well, that makes sense, but, yeah. Anyways, yeah. I hope you guys like hanging out with me. I know I'm really stupid. Also, this is really long, so if you made it all the way here, I really appreciate you. Yeah. I want to read the other stories, so if it was interesting to you, or if you liked the Five Nights at Freddy's stories, just let me know. If you guys want to do something else to hang out, let me know too. We can do something else. I don't really care. Just let me know. Yeah. Really appreciate you guys. Make sure to drink water. Hopefully you ate today. If not, make sure you eat today. Yeah. You guys are really cute. Peace out. I don't know what to say. It was nice hanging out with you guys.